To the UK now, where the Scottish Parliament has voted to retain a new hate crime law. It was put in place on April the 1st, but the Scottish Tory party called for it to be scrapped. Opposition MSPs accused the government of failing to recognise the strength of feeling on the issue among the public. It consolidates existing laws and extends protections against stirring up hatred, which were already in place in terms of racial hatred, and now it's being offered to other groups, such as the elderly and disabled. Let's bring in Arise correspondent Lape Olarinoye, who is in London for us. Lape, the way Parliament went about this today is about as convoluted as when they put the law in place to start with. Instead of simply voting down the motion to scrap it, they amended the motion to support the law and then passed that amendment. It's no surprise really that some people don't understand what's going on. So let's start with the basics. What exactly does this law contain?
Well, it was introduced, should I say, back in 2021 when current First Minister Yusuf Hamza back then he was still Justice Secretary. And it was intended, like you rightly said, to protect a speech that was targeted against racial and other groups. And now, of course, the confusion, by the way, I share that same confusion, just reading into this story alone is quite convoluted, is now it's been expressed to go into other groups as well. The frustration for many of those involved in this law is the fact that it was initially supported by the Labour Party in Scotland as well as the Liberal Democrats. But there's been a severe pushback from the Tories, the Scottish Conservative Party, who say that this is a massive infringement on freedom of speech. That's where the debate has come in as to why there's a call for it to be repealed. Furthermore, there's been a lot of complaints from the wider society around freedom of expression. There's been thousands of complaints reportedly that police have had to deal with. Police who, by the way, are already in Scotland severely understaffed and are now having to deal with the pushback and the criticism and the frustration and vexation, I would go as far as saying, from the wider society about this hate crime law. And so that is why it has become front and centre of the Scottish Parliament discussing whether it should go through or not, or whether, like you rightly said, it should be amended.
You mentioned there the amount of complaints that have been made. I mean, Police Scotland have faced an absolute deluge since this legislation was put in place. In the first week alone, there were more than 7,000 complaints made, but only 240 of those were actually recorded as hate crimes. Why have there been so many reports from the public?
Well, like I was just mentioned earlier, Faith, a lot of reports from the public about complaints regarding this is particularly to do with the fact that a lot of people across not just Scotland, but the wider UK believe that there's an infringement on freedom of expression. Many people feel as though that now they can be persecuted, they can be convicted of a crime for purely saying what they believe or sharing their opinions which could offend thousands of other people. And like you rightly pointed out there, 70,000 complaints in the first week, 240 of them hate crimes based off of the details of that act. And worse off, the police are understaffed and are having to deal with complaints from people as opposed to really focusing on crimes that are of more of a serious nature. And so for that reason, it has caused a bit of a fury across Scotland as to people unsure of what they can and can't say without the fear of being convicted. So there's been a huge backlash to this. And like I said, it was introduced in 2021. We're now in 2024, and yet it's still causing so much anger within the wider communities and even across the political spectrum as well. There is a lot of pushback from the incumbent party saying that, this is scheduled to stay. It's meant to protect people as much as it is intended to do so. But actually, the backlash and the opposition and the criticism that it has received so far does beg the question as to whether this act will go as far as intended.
Scotland has some unique rivalries. We heard from football pundit and former Rangers manager Ali McCoist that he and 40,000 others would all fall foul of this law whenever Rangers play Celtic, of course, one of the biggest rivalries in football in the world. The Scottish Government says this law has been misunderstood. Why has it been so badly misunderstood? Because the government has actually been quite clear. This isn't about if you offend someone, you can be charged with a crime. That's not what this law is about. It's about protecting certain characteristics of the disabled, for instance, in the same way that you would racism. Why has it been so badly misunderstood by the public?
I mean, I would say to you, Faith, for many years, people have gotten away with saying things that are now considered in today's world as offensive. That is really the crux of the matter. People are misunderstanding it because they have felt comfortable and have felt that it's normal to say a lot of things, by the way, that are very much okay to say in football rivalry, like you've rightly pointed out. A lot of things that have been said for years towards different races, and now even more so sexualities as well. That's what the law is intended to do, to protect those vulnerable, if you like, groups in society who may have been in many years been subject or targets of derogatory terms that are now considered, of course, derogatory terms. Things that may single them out or may no longer be accepted in today's world. And it's that transition that people are really struggling to understand. When does it become a crime? When does it mean that if I say something that probably my grandparent would have said many years ago that was okay, is now not okay?
Lapi, women are not included in this law. Instead, the government is looking at a separate misogyny law because, of course, women, particularly in countries like Scotland and elsewhere, come under, abuse is a strong word, but they do, they get a lot of abuse. Misogyny not protected under this law, but despite being one of the definitions of hate. But this new law that they're planning to put into force has also come under criticism, hasn't it? Why is that?
Like you've rightly pointed out, I think there is a lot of confusion around the different layers and context to it. Who's included, who is not included, who needs to have a separate law. I would say that from what I've gathered, the reason why that women's law has not been, or misogyny, if you like, hasn't really been included in this is because that goes into, that trickles down into a various layer of societies. The main issue here at hand is what people consider as a hate crime and what the law is saying a hate crime is. For many people, the topic of misogyny needs a lot more direction and clarity as to what can be considered and what can be considered as a crime. And so for that reason, of course, like you've rightly pointed out, that would definitely be something that is curated separately. But with regards to the hate crime in itself, it's targeted at specific groups who are usually, like I said, targets of specific types of speech, specific types of terms used, and things that, like I said, for many centuries and for many years have been said in a normalized environment. The aim is to stop that from continuing and to make people understand that that can now be considered a crime. It's still very confusing. There's still very much many more layers to it. But for now, that's the only sense of clarity that can be drawn from this ongoing law.
Lapi, thank you so much for that. Lapi Olorunnoye, who is our correspondent in London.